Well, first up on the bulletin, as the Iran-Israel conflict escalates, the focus has now shifted from airstrikes to nuclear scare. In fact, G7 leaders have already issued a rare unified statement. In fact, the message is very clear that Iran must never have nuclear weapons. In fact, the G7 has also backed Israel's right to self-defense, but has called for civilian protection and an immediate de-escalation of the tension. In fact, the summit has also committed to safeguarding global energy markets from the shock of this conflict after initial reluctance. American President Donald Trump also signed the statement before leaving the summit early. In fact, at the G7 summit, the French President Emmanuel Macron has reacted to Trump's dramatic early departure. Macron has claimed that the US president has considered the prospect of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran as well. In fact, let me go across to our consulting editor, Srinjoy Chaudhary, who's joining us. Srinjoy, it's very interesting that you have the G7 putting out a statement right at the start saying that it's important that Iran realizes that it will never have nukes. It should not have nuclear weapons. However, it has also put out an appeal to Israel to de-escalate. How far will it go to convince both the sides?
Well, both sides have to take those decisions. Both Israel has to de-escalate, means that Israel and Iran should not aim or missiles at each other. First. The second, of course, relates to the fact that Iran has been enriching its uranium, and there are enrichment plants. Now, to have a nuclear weapon, you need to enrich U-235 to about 80% more or more. Now, to do that, you need an enrichment plant, which is a very long process. Now, if Iran stops that, and it can continue to have a peaceful nuclear program because it has signed the NPT, there is no problem. That's what the G7 countries minus America is saying. Now, what America's position on this is not clear. In any case, President Trump changes his positions often enough. But at this point, if America is working towards a ceasefire with the help of some countries in the Gulf, like Qatar or Oman or Saudi Arabia or whatever, then it's a very positive development.
Well, in fact, do stay on with us because it's important for us to remind our viewers as to how at the G7 summit, the French President Emmanuel Macron, he's already reacted. We just got you that reaction coming in from Macron saying that the US president was considering the prospect of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But interestingly, right after that, President Trump has said he's not working on a ceasefire. Well, as we were just telling you, that was the French President Macron saying that Trump has gone back. He, in fact, remember, these are the visuals you can see of Donald Trump after the photo op with the G7 leaders. He immediately went back to US, back to Washington. However, Macron has said that he's returning in order to ensure that there is a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Of course, right after that, you had President Trump coming out and saying that there is no such thing. He said that there is no such possible ceasefire that is being brokered right now. He says there's going to be something much bigger than that. In fact, last night, US President Donald Trump sparked off panic in Iran. Remember, when he came out with an impromptu evacuation call for the entire city of Tehran, which is, of course, the capital of Iran. In fact, in a post on Truth Social, President Trump has cited that what he believed was Iran's rejection of a deal to curb nuclear weapon development. In fact, Trump has written this on Truth Social without elaborating on the reason that Iran's city of 10 million people needs to be evacuated immediately. Listen in to what Donald Trump said about Iran not wanting to sign the truce deal.
Constant touch. And as I've been saying, I think a deal will be signed or something will happen, but a deal will be signed. And I think Iran is foolish not to sign one. Look, Iran should have signed the deal.
If it would help bring Iran to the negotiating table, would you guarantee that the U.S. would not get involved militarily?
Well, I think Iran basically is at the negotiating table. They want to make a deal. And as soon as I leave here, we're going to be doing something. But I have to leave here. I have, this commitment. I have a lot of commitments. I have a commitment to a lot of countries.